Hello viewers, welcome back to our YouTube channel. We are continuing our discussion on Henry Gibson's Adulterous. We begin the last act of this text, and that is Act 3. During this study, we will consider Episode 1. As we are welcomed to the news act in page 85, we see the same scene. The table has been placed in the middle of the stage this time, and there are chairs around the table. A lamp is burning on the table, and the door into the hall stands open. Dance music is heard in the room above, and this dance could be the tarantella dance that the Helmers were to attend at the Stenbox. Mrs. Linde is sitting at the table, idly turning over the leaves of a book. She tries to read, but does not seem able to collect her thoughts. And what must be disturbing Mrs. Linde here is that she went to persuade Krogstad to demand back his letter, but she didn't find him. So she left him a note. Every now and then, she listens intently for a sound at the outer door, suggesting that Mrs. Linde expects that Krogstad will be at the Helmers any time from that time. So that is the scene to which we are treated in this Act 3. Everything that goes on in Act 3 takes place in this scene. This episode begins with a flashback about Mrs. Linde's past. When Krogstad arrives, we are able to see or to find out that initially or previously in the post, Mrs. Linde had an affair with Krogstad. And this one we find from the speech made by Krogstad in page 86. Krogstad, who comes out as bitter, calls Mrs. Linde a heartless woman who jails a man when a more lucrative position shows up, or when a more lucrative chance turns up. And this one also brings out the self-sacrificial nature of Kristen Linde that we had talked about. Kristen Linde had decided to desert Krogstad because she had right in her hands her ailing mother and two brothers who could not fend for themselves. So then Kristen Linde decided to jilt Krogstad and get married to a wealthy man. So through flashback, we are able to join the dots in the past between Mrs. Kristen Linde and Torvald, and Krogstad, I mean. Krogstad also says that in abandoning him, Kristen Linde wrote to him a letter. What Kristen Linde says, that was meant to bring or to put an end to anything that Krogstad felt for her. This could be seen as an act of betrayal by Mrs. Kristen Linde. Abandoning Krogstad for the purposes of the wealthy man that she went to, that passes out as betrayal. Again, in this episode, we are able to see Mrs. Kristen Linde and Krogstad rekindle their love. Their love story that had come to an end seems to be rekindled. It seems to be brought back to life in this episode. In page 87, we are able to see a metaphorical reference to their lives. That is, Mrs. Linde and Krogstad as shipwrecked and clinging to some wreckage. Krogstad cannot believe that Mrs. Kristen Linde would run the risk of starting it over with him again because of his strained reputation in town. So then we see Krogstad try to metaphorically explain to Mrs. Kristen Linde the situation by saying that he is a shipwrecked person clinging to some wreckage. So just as a ship that is wrecked in the sea, that is the same way that his life is also shipwrecked. He has no reputation. He has no good name in this society. So he calls himself a shipwrecked person just clinging to some wreckage. And the wreckage that he could be clinging to is his clerical position at the bank. In answering to this, Mrs. Kristen Linde also says that she is also shipwrecked. She is also like a shipwrecked person clinging to some wreckage. And could be the wreckage that she is clinging to is the hope of getting a job at the bank. Interestingly and coincidentally, the job that she is to have at the bank is the same clerical job that Krogstad holds at the bank. Mrs. Linde then, in initiating this conversation, bringing back to life their love life, she hopes that Krogstad will accord her the opportunity to be a mother to his children. She believes in Krogstad's real character. And she says that she can dare anything together with Krogstad. And these statements she makes in page 89. It's interesting to see the kind of ecstasy, the happiness and bliss that engulfs the Helmers' living room at the end of the conversation between Mrs. Linde and Krogstad. And let us have a look at page 91. And in this page, at the end of their conversation, when Mrs. Linde tries to tell Krogstad to now leave because the Helmers are coming back from the dance, then Krogstad comments that he has never had such an amazing piece of good fortune in his life. The amazing piece of good fortune is that finally in town, he has found someone who can accept him for who he is. Mrs. Kristen Linde has accepted to welcome him back with his tainted past. And he says, on this day, he has had such an amazing piece of good fortune. The ecstasy that is also seen in Mrs. Kristen Linde comes in form of a soliloquy on that same page 91, when she happily comments that finally she has had someone to care for, she has had someone to take care of. And, you know, it is kind of the opposite of what she went to do with Krogstad. You know, she went to persuade Krogstad to demand back his letter unread, but at this point, she has achieved something that makes her happy, makes them happy with Krogstad. From this, the betrayal by Mrs. Kristen Linde is quite glaring. When we see in page 90, when we come to page 90, and we see Mr. Krogstad regretfully makes a statement by saying that after such an amazing piece of good fortune in his life, after the quiet and unexpected turn of events in his life, then we see him demand that he's going to wait for Helmer and he's going to demand back his letter, and that Helmer must not read it. So then Mrs. Kristen Linde seems to have Krogstad where she wanted him. And with this mood, Mr. Krogstad accepts to demand back his letter. But what does Kristen Linde do? Kristen Linde makes a shocking statement, and that is really what brings out her betrayal. She says that Helmer must know all about it. This unhappy secret must be disclosed. They must have an understanding between them, which is impossible with the concealment and falsehood going on. I may not be aware of what is going on in the psyche of Mrs. Kristen Linde, but then we see her betray Nora when she had Krogstad where she wanted Krogstad to be. She again moves away from her initial idea, and she decides to say that Krogstad, Torvald, must know about the secret. What then do we mean by this statement that Mrs. Kristen Linde again makes towards the end of this episode? And towards the end of this episode, we see Mrs. Kristen Linde in page 90 make this statement that a woman who has once sold herself for the sake of another doesn't do it the second time. What is the meaning of this statement? The meaning of this statement is that while his mother was ailing and she had her two brothers who could not fend for themselves, she decided to jilt Krogstad, the man she loved, to be married with a wealthy old man so that she could fend for her two brothers and the sick mother. So she says that after having sacrificed for her mother and her two siblings, she would not do it the second time. That is when Krogstad doubts if really what Mrs. Linde here says is genuine, or she's just having some overstrained sense of sacrifice on behalf of her friend, Nora. Friends, this brings us to the end of the episodic analysis of episode 1, act 3. The next time we meet, we'll be looking at episode 2, the same act 3. If you've not subscribed to the channel, remember to like, subscribe, and share.